Hello,
Hello.
how are you?
Good. How are you?
As well. Did you get the Canva I sent you?
Yeah, I just saw that.
Hi, Bernice.
She's connecting.
Yeah. Send out a quick message.
Hello, Shane.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well.
Yes, good. Can see me? I can see you clearly. Okay, good. How's everything? Did you buy a new business?
Working on it. Got one under
Very
contract.
close.
Yeah.
You have something good coming?
Yes. Yeah, we're pretty excited about it.
Yeah.
We'll
Good.
definitely be able to share that with the group in terms of like assessing the deal and stuff. Once we finish closing on it, we'll definitely go over all the details and why we bought it and all that fun stuff. It'll be fun.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. How are things going with you? Any luck finding deals?
I, I'm not looking to find deals yet because I was waiting for this meeting to understand what we are looking when in terms of EBITDA. That's mostly. Yeah, I was waiting for this Zoom actually to have a better idea what I'm looking when I look at the business.
Yeah. All right. Great. Well, hopefully this helps you out. This is the last of the like official like content one, and the next ones moving forward are going to be open space for people to come in with the deals that they're looking at. We'll basically have you redact some of the information. That's what we're going to do today. Actually, Bernice's deal today we're going to talk about. And basically turn this into an underwriting type Zoom where we can take a look at it and give it a high level underwrite based on what information we have and what tell you what we're missing and other things like that. So it'll be one of those types of Zooms moving forward so that we can give people some value that way.
So the next meeting is going to be we're bringing deals and we review the deals and we see what deal is the best.
Yeah, so you're gonna pre-vet the deal a little bit, right? You're gonna make sure that it's something that's like in
That's
something
good.
you're gonna want to purchase for one, right? Like something you want to
That,
purchase. You get all the information on it. You've made sure that it has enough cash flow to purchase that deal. And then also it's within the spaces you want to be, right? We don't want to just use it as like a space to kind of just look at all deals everywhere, but we do want to make it a set of deals so that we can all work. Give me a sec, folks.
yeah.
Jalen, would you mind jumping in and or Marley just chatting? I just gotta go say hi to my daughter. She just got home from school and she's really upset. So Scott, I'll be right back and we'll be able to if you want to pose your question, we'll let Marley and Jalen answer that real quick. I'll be right back.
Go ahead, Scott.
Okay, great. Hey, quick question for you. And this may be covering today's webinar here. I'm a broker and I'm repping my next door neighbor buying a business.
Okay.
And we're trying to get an idea of value. And I mean, I've somewhat understanding of valuing what the business is manufacturing vitamins and so on. It's
Okay.
netting 200,000.
Okay.
And it's about a 3 times net business. And the asking price is 840. And what they're saying is, and that seems to me to be a little bit rich. And
Yep.
there's $80,000 worth of raw materials. There's like $100,000 worth of equipment. Do you do the 3 times net plus the raw materials plus the equipment, or no? Typically.
No. So, I mean, it's kind of difficult to give an answer based off of the high level information, but
Right.
I normally include, well, I normally build upon the multiple, but just based off of the revenue that you're telling me right now, I wouldn't be giving that a 3x multiple. So maybe it is worth that what did you say? 800,000?
840. Yeah.
840. Yeah, if that 840 includes the raw materials and
It does.
the other. Okay, I mean, yeah, that's a little closer. I normally do like a discount to most assets because like the idea is coming into the business, if you had to liquidate assets for some reason, you're not going to get 100% of its value. You'll maybe get 50-60% of its value.
Right.
So that's generally how I handle that.
Okay, so if it's netting 2, so that's 600,000. Okay, so material, so that's 7 with the equipment, and then yeah, so right there. It's just I know my neighbors don't want to pay that, but for
Course.
the no, I know, but the buyer, I mean, she could just she could probably double the business like within a year.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to say, you may have to pay a little bit more for this, but your ability versus anybody else, any other buyer, is insane what she can do because she has a ton of contacts that she can just plug and play.
Yeah, yeah.
But
So
yeah,
I have a couple of questions.
okay,
The first is that 200,000 based off of the trailing 12 months? Is that an average over the last few years? I
2
generally
years.
generally
Yeah,
like at
well,
least
and
3-year
actually
average.
the way it's broken down is the wife is taking 140,000 salary,
Okay.
and there's 60,000 profit every year.
Okay. So 60,000 profit on top of this salary that she's drawing.
Right.
Okay. Okay. So her full SDE is what, 180?
Yeah, I think about 200.
200. Okay. How long has this business been around?
15 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So 15 years. So interesting that the value.
He's a tired seller. I mean, he's in
Okay.
his 70s. He's just
Yeah,
done.
got it. Okay.
And he hasn't put money in the marketing. I mean, he's horrible on Amazon. I
Okay.
mean, and he sells directly to other manufacturers as,
Mhm.
but they put their own labels on it. It just, yeah, he's just burnt. And that's why my client, she's younger and full of energy and all that.
Yeah, hungry to
But
make it
I'm
happen.
just trying to justify the 840. And I had the broker try to justify it, and he pulled some stuff out of where. And I think
Yeah.
he's wrong.
Yeah, yeah. Me personally, just based off of what I know, I would give it a 2x multiple and add whatever assets.
Okay.
Now, there is another opportunity to give them what they're asking for, but do it on terms that make sense for her. So maybe it's 500 or 600 at closing, but you have either deferred payments or payments based upon like the performance of the business as time goes on. So those payments can be spread out for, a year, 2 years, whatever they're willing to take on.
Right. Okay. Hey, and also they've got an SBA idle loan on there from COVID, and he's saying it's assumable. I haven't heard that those are assumable.
Yeah, I don't think so. And so that that in and of itself is a liability. How much is that?
Oh, it's 150,000. I mean, my thought was it'd be paid off in escrow. But
Yeah.
they're saying that you could keep it because it's only like 3.75% interest.
Yeah.
And I know we could do, get creative and financing and all that stuff. And you buy the LLC and keep it and hope the SBA doesn't catch it, which I doubt they would because they have too many other things that they're working on. But
Yeah.
um,
But is that 150,000 of debt considered in the purchase price?
I would assume yes, because when I originally asked him about it, he said it'd be paid off in escrow.
Okay. So he would use his
and
proceeds.
right.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, the other, if she's willing to continue to carry that debt, you can knock off, the 150, maybe even 200,000 off of the purchase price.
Right.
Make that happen.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Marley, can I ask you something?
Yeah, absolutely.
First of all, nice to see you after quite some time.
Yes, yeah, nice to see you too. We've been so heads down on this acquisition that I
Yeah.
haven't been active.
So in terms of buying a business and the seller put a price, do we assume the debt as well, or is
Yeah, yeah. So if it depends on what type of purchase you're doing. So there's
Mhm.
an asset purchase, which is basically you're just purchasing the physical assets of the business or the IP of the business if it's a technology company, or you're buying stock. So you're actually buying the entity itself. With buying the entity, yes, you are purchasing the liabilities as well. So you want to consider that when providing your offer so that you can create scenarios where you're either paying off those loans or again, assuming them and understanding those extra carrying costs.
Mhm.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Okay.
Sorry, I couldn't find the mute button, everyone. All right, so thank you everyone for kind of jumping in and asking those questions. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna assess a deal right now. Bernice, you have a deal that we're gonna look at. We've gone ahead and we've redacted a couple pieces of information, and I want to bring that up so we can all look at that. Marley's gonna go ahead and spend some time with myself as well. We're gonna spend some time looking over the deal. It's not very much information yet. And I don't know, Bernice, did you get some more info on this deal after our last conversation?
No, I didn't get any more information. I'm still waiting for the broker to provide more information.
Well,
we're talking.
Okay.
We will be talking about the business, the childcare business.
Yes, correct.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, next. Okay, let's do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and Bernice, am I saying your name right?
Yeah, Berenice, but yeah,
Bernice?
everybody's calling me Bernice.
No,
Yeah,
Bernice
that's
it
all
is.
right.
I want to make sure. Thank you, Bernice. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna pull up her deal. We're gonna talk about it. We're gonna talk about the pieces. One of the things that I want to, before we jump into that, I want to talk with you, Bernice, is I want to talk to you about what your like buyer persona is, right? Because you are looking at this deal for a reason. And that's for everyone. I want you to really think about what you're doing and why you're buying these things. And there are like 3 or 4 questions. And Marley, would you mind asking those 3 or 4 questions that we talked about today about like what kind of deal or what kind of a purchase of that is? Is that okay if I put that on you?
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. So when we're talking about buying businesses, the first question is, are you buying for yourself or are you buying for someone else? Like you have a buy box to go after. If you are the buyer, then what do you plan on being an owner operator? So do you plan on sitting in the business and helping run the day to day? Or do you plan on being an owner investor? So someone that is just essentially collecting cash flow, right? From the business. If you want to be an owner operator, you want to be in the business, you have experience running that business, then you want to start thinking about what industries you A, have experience in, and B, are passionate about, because this is something that you're going to be doing day in and day out, and you want to make sure that you can make it successful. Those are the big ones. And then if you are going to be an owner operator, what amount of cash flow or payment to yourself do you need on a monthly basis to make sure that your family operating expenses are taken care of and that you can truly focus on the business outside of that amount?
So those are 4 or 5 great questions. So Bernice, can we go through them with you on this specific deal and see what, just to kind of give everyone the persona that you're doing and before we look at the deal so we can see that. So question number 1 was, are you buying for yourself or for somebody else? Like, are you trying to find it for someone else to take over, or are you trying to buy this for your personal hold?
Buying it for myself. Yeah, I have experience in this field.
Okay.
I own a childcare. So I have plenty of experience in this, and I believe it's a good business because I have kids.
Awesome.
Okay. Beautiful.
That's awesome. So I imagine you want to be an owner operator then.
Yes, and I'm educated. I'm a early childhood educator. So
Okay.
I have plenty of education experience. English.
Wonderful,
Beautiful.
wonderful. And would this be replacing your current job? Is that like your ideal scenario? Or like, what does that look like for you?
Okay, say it again, sorry.
Would purchasing this business and basically purchasing a role for yourself replace your existing job income, however you make money? Or is it
Yeah,
additive?
Yeah, like you said, it's for cash flow, and I'm not gonna be dependent on this business to support myself and my family financially.
Okay.
So this
Okay.
is something separate. Yeah, it's just an extra income.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then is there a amount of money per month cash flow that you are targeting?
Okay, after attending too many Zooms, and then I follow the Hispanic girl, I forgot the name of
Cody,
the business. Huh?
Cody Sanchez.
Yes. So they always suggest to go for business the 100K or more,
Yes.
right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that's yeah. And I believe this business is making more than that. So
Yeah. Okay.
until I see the paperwork. The proof,
Yes. Yeah.
right?
Proof is in the pudding. No, that's great. I like to put a baseline of at least like 10 grand a month. Like, I feel like that's a good amount. So where if you want to put any like growth initiatives in, or you want to perhaps try to bring on a part-time person, like you're not going to completely break your bank. Okay. So with all of that in mind,
I gave you share access, Marley, if you want to run that Canva, or I can do it. Either way works.
yeah, can you do it? I don't want to break my
You got it.
notes. Okay, thank you.
All right. Let me make sure I have it all redacted. Okay, we're good. Okay, so can everyone see this? All right, great. So this is what Bernice got from her broker. So this is essentially this is called a SIM. So this is they might call it a confidential business review, a confidential information memorandum. It's just a confidential piece of information that we redacted all the info from. So there's no information of where it's from. I don't even have the broker on here. I wanted to make sure that it was clean, so that when we talk about this, we can talk about it openly as much as we want, right? So, and same thing, Brittany, just don't say where it's at or anything like that. That way you don't have to worry about any NDA stuff. So as we kind of move forward in these Zooms, like we're gonna ask you to send this stuff to us in advance so that we can take a peek at it. And also we're gonna have those questions that Marley just mentioned, like we want those answered, right? So like, is this for you? Is this for somebody else, et cetera, so that we know what we're looking for when we go to talk about this deal live, so that we can do that. So this is a very basic one. So this is from one of the brokers. You'll see this a lot. This is a single page. We call this like a one sheet, right? A lot of in-depth sims or confidential business reviews or whatever they call it. They're going to be more in depth, right? Depending on the business, they're going to have a whole, like, they'll call it a data room. So it might be a Google Drive folder or Dropbox folder that they'll also send once they've gotten past the sniff test, right? Because they do a BS sniff test to see if you're actually a buyer, right? They're not going to just give you all the information day one, because they don't want to be dealing with people kicking tires. Just like if I was going to sell a car, I'm not going to go ahead and invite every single person over before they even say like whether they can handle doing a deal or not, right? So they just kind of do a sniff test. They're going to want to talk to you and understand if you actually can handle this deal or if this is yours. Berenice has already experienced this. I think we reached out, we talked, you got this to us on Thursday or Friday of last week, I believe, and you probably already reached out last weekend, I assume, for all that other info.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I sent the email Monday and
Okay.
I still haven't get anything.
So you are experienced what we like to call the Joker broker dead black hole. Okay, so brokers who are doing deals, a lot of them are just not they've probably got a bunch coming in. They miss a lot of things. They don't have systems in place. Like this is an automated thing that you probably got. Once you filled out the form, this probably got sent over to you and that was that, right? And from there, did you have an actual conversation with the broker yet?
No, the other thing that they suggest is to register with them on
Mhm.
the website. So, and they ask for what kind of business I'm looking for. to
Right.
purchase. So
Right.
they can send me whatever they have available. I haven't received anything, so probably they haven't get anything.
Right.
Um,
Yep. So
yeah.
they're building their email list, right?
Yes.
Just be aware of this, everyone. Their goal is to get in front of as many people as possible. Your goal is to get a deal, right? So you might have to pester a little more. You might actually have to pick up the phone and call directly to that broker and leave a message or two or text them or whatever you got to do to get this information. Because I guarantee you this was sent in an automation. She typed in her info, clicked, I want some more info. They sent her an NDA. She signed the NDA. As soon as that went through, this got sent to her and it's all automated. And now we're waiting for crickets for the brokers, right? So just be aware of that as you do this. That's why relationships with brokers who are doing the things that you want to do is really important. Like we're working with a SaaS broker, a software as a service broker right now. And as part of this conversation, like I mentioned last week or the week before, it was an interesting startup to our calls, right? Like he didn't want to deal with us. He thought we were tire kickers. He thought we were buying for someone else. He thought we were just connectors. And there's a lot of pieces to that. And we had to clarify, like, no, we're really like here to buy. Like, and so now we have this relationship that I know that when we close on this deal, he's going to connect us with a multi-million-dollar SaaS acquisitions company that liked the software that we're buying, so that later on when we level this up, if we want to, we can partner with them or we can do other things. So having that relationship with those brokers is really important because they're also connected to other businesses in the industry that you're going for. Childcare, right? You might be able to buy up all the childcare places in a geographic location and rebrand them all to the same one that you're working on. So there's so many opportunities to bolt things on and roll them up and do different pieces to, and again, I'm going to define bolt on. Bolt on is taking a different type of business and adding it to your portfolio that supports that business. And roll up is the actual same type of business. So if I was going to buy another childcare, I own this one, I want to buy another one. That's a roll up. It's another one. I'm just scooping it under the head and I'm rebranding it to mine. Right. So keep those brokers in your back pocket once you build the relationships because they are going to really, really do great things with you if you've built that relationship. Getting those relationships is key though, right? You have to get to that point. Soapbox off. All right. So this business, we're going to go through the pieces and then we're going to talk about, there's another sheet here that has the basics on it. So, okay, talks about business hours, talks about how many employees. So we've got 1 full-time employee and 9 part-time employees. Okay. So it tells me that they've got a staff, which is cool. We don't know right now what the seller is doing in this business. We don't know if they're actively in the business right this minute, just by looking at this. We don't know if they're just on the back end. We just know that they own this business. They've had it for 29 years. I imagine they started out with an in-home daycare facility 29 years ago. They grew and grew, and they needed to add more people. So they might be the one full-time, or they might have a person managing the place. I don't fully know. Vernice, is that the case? Do you have an idea, or is this a completely what is it called when you're not in the business?
Yeah,
Absentee.
well,
Thank you.
according to the information they saw on the website, the broker website, it says that there's a person, I believe a director, taking care of the business. The owner is barely interacting over there. It's not really full-time. No. So I believe the full-time employee is the director and the 9 part-time employees are the teachers.
Okay, beautiful. So that means that there's someone that owns this. They've got an operator in place. That's the director, right? You always got to look at the business as the pieces, the people, right? It's every business is about the people, right? You can have the best software in the world. You can have the best HVAC equipment in the world, but if you don't have the right people in place, it's not going to matter for crap. Like you're just going to have a liability in the end, right? A liability is not what we're trying to buy. We're trying to buy an asset, right? So we've got someone who runs this full time. Wonderful. I have a director and we've got 9 part-time employees, which are probably all the teachers. There might be someone who comes in to clean, who knows what the ratio is, right? We don't know how many students are here. I'm not seeing that either. So that's going to be something else that we need to factor in. I was a teacher, so I get the ratios and all that. every state for this type of business has ratios and laws for how many you're allowed to have. Vernice, do you know in the state that you're in what the ratio is requirement is?
Yeah, for infant is 5,
Okay.
1.
Okay.
Yeah, for 1 to 2 is, I believe, 12. But I can look in the website. I have access to the license agency. I always can go and
Cool.
look the ratio and everything.
And you have your license still active?
My license? Yeah, as an educator, yes.
Cool.
And
Cool. So
but the business require license too. I mean, yeah, it depends on the capacity of the building here. And they sell in the building. They can finance the real estate.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's dig into some of that stuff. I'm just kind of setting the stage for people who are not aware of this type of business as well. So we've got 9 teachers. Let's say that they're all 1 to 2 year olds. So we'll say it's a 1 to 12 ratio, right? So for every 1 teacher, they're allowed 12 students. Okay. That means you can look at the numbers and say, okay, if there's 9 teachers, we don't know this, we have no clue. But let's say there's 9 teachers, let's say they've averaged 10 each. So let's say there's 90 students that come through this. Maybe there's a morning shift and an afternoon shift, right? That's probably how this is set up. Morning daycare, afternoon daycare. That's my guess. So now you've got 9 teachers. So you got 90 potential kids in that coming through that building. So I mean, that's 90 paying memberships, right? Just keep that in your mind as we look at these numbers, and we can probably do the division that way if we really want to. So again, the reason they're selling is retirement. They've had it for 29 years. They're the sole proprietor. That's the type of business, LLC, sole proprietor. It might be a corporation, whatever that might be, that structure. Training. So needed and negotiated. So that is something to think about as Vernice goes into conversation with the seller. Cool. How long are you staying on? What does that transition look like? And then you negotiate that now. You don't wait until closing day, right? That has to be part of the conversation up front. Like, I need you on for 3 months full time still, or part time, whatever hours you decide on. I need you for another 3 months as a consultant, and then I need you for the next 6 months as a resource in the long run, right? So however you do that depends on the relationship between how you negotiate that. Covenant not complete. I'm not sure what that means. Do you know what that means, Marley?
That means that the person that owns the business agrees that they will not compete with you. So essentially agreeing to do a non-compete in a geographical area normally.
Got it. I said not to complete, and I was like, oh, compete. That's what it is. So a non-compete agreement. So they will agree not to compete. Got it. Thank you.
Correct.
ADHS, that's a specific type of license for, I assume, health services of some kind. So is that basically a daycare facility, like daycare license? Is that correct, Bernie?
Yeah, it is. It is. That's me. Yeah, Arizona Department of Health Services.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome. There is a building, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Now, this business might only be $250,000, 49,000, but you also need a business, or you need to be renting a building, right? So you need a building, or you need to be renting it. So keep that in mind. That's why the lease is to be negotiated. Lease terms need negotiated. So that could throw off this entire deal, right? If you decide to purchase this real estate, that could also throw off this whole deal, right? You have to keep those things in mind as you're going into it, right? If you're going to buy it, maybe you're not going to buy it straight out. Maybe you're going to go do a lease option where you have the option to purchase it after a certain amount of time, knowing that the business is cash flowing. 4,200 square feet, it's a good sized building. So that tells me that this facility has a good amount of space to work with. So there's probably quite a bit of room, and those 9 teachers probably make sense. Terms, they want cash, SBA, or some seller carry. So they want you to bring some cash to the table. If you do an SBA, you have to bring some cash to the table. There's no way around that. Marley, what's the numbers on that? What percentage do you bring for a down payment?
It's 10%, but you technically can do half of that as seller finance, but the SBA will require you to have some skin in the game.
Got it. So seller carry, I know, Vernice, you said that the seller is willing to do a seller carry of some kind. Do you know the percentage?
No, I don't. It just said a good amount. What was the word that they used somewhere? Substantial.
Substantial, yeah.
Substantial down payment, yeah.
Yeah.
Substantial.
Yeah. So, substantial down payment on 250, all right, maybe you do 20% down, 25% down. I know that they want out of the business, right? They want to retire. That's why they're selling it. So that might look like more than 10%, right? 10% is 25K on this plus closing costs. Don't forget you have lawyer attorney fees, things like that. So out of pocket, you're likely going to be bringing minimum of, I'd say 20K on this deal, right? To close on it if you went SBA and you did half of that down payment seller finance. There's other things you can do where if you purchase the real estate or did a seller carry, there's lots of creative ways you can make this happen on this deal, but we don't know all that yet. So down payments to be determined and assumed debt. There is no debt. It's an asset purchase, right? The property itself is an asset, the real estate. So you wouldn't be taking on a liability unless you take out a loan to purchase that real estate. All right, so the preschool center offers a variety of options for care development, preschoolers, toddlers, and have the same location of 29 years. So that's amazing. Updated fixtures, equipment, kept the facility clean, maintained, located near blank. Consider the financing for a qualified buyer. What that means, we don't know what their criteria is. If you're a qualified buyer, you're likely going to go SBA, right? So it's kind of if you're going to get better terms with the seller, great, but based on what they want, substantial down payment, not likely. Real estate is available for purchase, and the seller will consider carrying a note on the real estate with another substantial down payment. So that's something to consider, especially in our world of some creative stuff. That is something that you can probably make happen. You can get a second position lender or even a first position lender to come in, and you can do some really creative stuff to purchase that property. And having the asset of the property, as long as it's worth 800 or more, right? It's going to have to be worth probably $1 million in order for something like that to work out. But you can potentially leverage that property to pay for this business, depending on the value of this property. So there's just so many interesting things that we just don't know yet that we can work on. So otherwise, they'll do a favorable rate to lease it. We don't know what that is. We would have to backwards calculate what we can afford. All right. So here's the financial information. Cash flow summary for the past year. That doesn't tell us much, to be honest, right? Past 12 months gives us a snapshot of this little piece out of 29 years, right? There's a giant spectrum of those 29 years. Obviously, 29 years ago, the rates for childcare was not the best compared to what it is now. Just like teachers' salaries when 29 years ago was, $10,000 and now they're at 100, right? So it's not going to give you the right perspective, but we need at least 3 years of cash flow summary minimum. And we're going to go down into down below for 2023, but we should have 3 years of taxes, 3 years of P&L, and 3 years of bank statements. We need all of those things in order to look at that. Am I missing anything, Marley, for what we need?
You won't need bank statements up front. You will in due diligence. I think you meant balance sheets.
Balance sheets, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'll repeat that. We need 3 years of balance sheets, 3 years of the P&L statements, and 3 years of taxes, right?
Correct.
Right. And so that's what should be given to Vernice when she reaches out on round 2, right? This is round 1. Round 2 is going to be more information. This at a high level looks decent, right? Do we know the industry multiple on childcare facilities?
For a small childcare facility, which is what I would consider this, it's normally 1 to 1.5 times SDE.
Okay.
So it's a little overpriced, which is very typical. So I think that you would be better off targeting probably like 200,000 at your top end for the purchase. That said, if they want 250, but they're willing to negotiate terms that are beneficial to you, it's still a good opportunity.
Absolutely. And so just to clarify, SDE, for those of you just learning terminology, SDE is seller discretionary earnings. On here, they just have it as discretionary earnings. Okay.
Yes.
So just keep that in mind. So basically multiple on small. Marley, what's the range for small businesses for the multiple when you use cash flow versus when you use revenue? I know as you get bigger, you can start using revenue as your multiple, but what's that look like?
Yeah, for anything that I'll say 90% of the time, we're probably going to be talking about cash flow, EBITDA, NOI. We're not going to be talking about revenue. Normally when you're buying based off of a revenue multiple, we're talking about tech companies, you know, SaaS companies, and they have to be very, very big companies.
Yeah. What would you say size of that company? Like what is the revenue of a company like that? Just to kind of give people perspective. We're talking about $1 million, we're talking about $100 million. Like where's the range on that to start?
Yeah, it's very difficult to give an exact answer, but I would say north of 1 million, but probably closer to the 100 million mark.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to give people perspective for when you're talking to brokers or sellers and they're like, oh, the multiple is this. And you're like, well, that's not based on your industry, based on this style. A lot of people will think that revenue is your multiple because they read that somewhere, but that's not true. It's based on your discretionary earnings. It's based on basically the take home after everyone gets paid their salary. So, just be aware of that as these brokers have conversations. They're going to say certain things, or the sellers are going to say certain things, and they're not going to give you apples for apples because everyone interprets things a little differently. Someone's going to say cash flow is this, and someone else is going to say no, cash flow is, cash flow is something else, right? I've seen deals where cash flow was revenue on the basic paperwork, and then I've seen other deals where they talk about cash flow and it's actually cash flow. It's seller discretionary earnings. So just be aware of that, right? Because there's multiple different levels. So I want to get through this page and then we'll jump to the other one. And Marley, I'm going to let you take over the second page after I go through some of these pieces. All right. So sales is 529,309. That's how much they've brought in from their membership. We're going to call it membership to make life easy on our brains. So their student membership, all the kids together, they bring in $529,000 a year. That's their gross profit, right? That's their gross income. That means that there's nothing taken out of it. That's just cash that comes in the door, right? Then they have expenses. Their expenses, they're saying, is almost $400,000, right? So that's 391,762. And then they have profit before taxes. Okay, so this is the profit prior to doing any of these adjustments that we're going to talk about in a minute, but it's before taxes, before they actually have to pay the tax man or tax woman. And that also kind of makes your brain think about this, right? Because if they're only like, how did that happen if they paid taxes on all of that? So Marley, I'm going to let you talk to the next couple points on adjustments, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so this is kind of an interesting setup that they have here, because normally when you're talking about adjustments, you're talking about EBITDA. So earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. But they're using it here for discretionary earnings as well, which is totally fine. When you're looking at adjustments, so we're going to go down here, depreciation, that's fine as long as they're able to show that they took depreciation in that amount and added it back. Fair market value rent, that's great that they included that. So that's basically saying we own the building, but in the event that you were taking over the business and you were having to pay rent versus have the mortgage covered, this is likely what you would spend in a year. So that's actually being subtracted from the discretionary earnings. A lot of times we will see P&Ls where they don't consider that or add it back or take it out, and what you thought you'd be getting $150,000 a year for, you'd actually only end up getting 100 because they didn't include that $50,000 cost. And then it looks like she did some, I'm assuming she or he did some personal expenses through the business. So those are normal add backs, like those aren't required to run the day to day. So it looks like some type of automobile and personal cell phones, one-time building upgrades, that's also acceptable to do as well. And that lands us with total adjustments of just shy of 6,000 reduction.
Awesome. So now we're down to discretionary earnings. Means that because they didn't calculate rent into it, that's why they added that back in to say like, hey, this is not in this thing, so we're gonna throw it in there. Subtract that from what we're talking about because it's not really an adjustment here because you're gonna have to pay that later on, right? So that number right there, Marley, is that gonna end up coming off of this SDE?
No, so that's already included in what's there. So that is subtracted out of their profit. And all of the other line items are called add backs. So they're not normal course of business costs. So they get to add it back in.
Right. I guess my question was, is this an expense that is not calculated out of this 529 right now? Right, so like,
Yes, that's why it's in the adjustments bucket.
Okay.
Correct.
Can you explain how the adjustments work really quick? Because I know that for me, like, when I first look at it, it's like, those are the adjustments based on the things that they did outside of the normal business stuff. But let's say they
Right.
didn't have any depreciation, let's say they didn't have any of these auto expenses. How is that gonna change this discretionary earnings number?
Then it would stay the same, right? So this is added back to the overall cost. And I again, I have seen people do add backs that truly cannot be classified as add backs. Like, for example, I had a CEO that had about $30,000 as an add back that was travel and a full team expenses for a mentorship or like event that they all go to, and it drives leads and marketing to their business. And he put that as an add back, but really it isn't, because that is a part of the normal course of business. That is how you get revenue into your doors. So if we take out that $30,000, where are we going to lose money at the top line revenue? Like, we don't know, right? So we have to just treat it as normal course of business. Other adjustments that I've seen that are interesting are if the person is working in the business, and let's say they were paying themselves $300,000 a year to be at an executive role, and they will claim that to replace themselves, it's only going to cost $100,000. So they give themselves an add back of $200,000, when in reality, you're not going to be able to go out and get a high level operator at like a C-level operator for $100,000 in any market. Like, it's just not reality. So it's basically just their opportunity to say, this is normal course of business, this isn't normal course of business. And then there's a conversation between you and the sellers about what truly is or is not.
Got it. So essentially, it just basically comes off like they're saying these expenses, they're basically removing those pieces and saying, okay, this $54,000 is not really calculated into this expense right now. So we're gonna have to add that in and say, okay, that's gonna change everything else. But all these other expenses were also really not part of that. So, hey, this is kind of a wash, is what they're trying to say. If they didn't have all these other expenses in here, then this expense number would actually go up technically, because then your take home is less, right? So just keep that in mind as we talk about that. So equipment that's included, there's, I'm sure there's lots of kid stuff in the building. There's lots of supplies, toys, things like that, their website, any other inventory supplies that come with it and with the business from that. And then additional, they have the real estate that is available for purchase if you want to purchase it. Or we can rent it for around 54. So that gives us a good idea of what the rent is going to be terms wise, where they were saying like, this is kind of fair market rent in the area. We can talk about that. So we can use that number right there to kind of help us calculate later on. So here is the redacted page about all the pieces here. So Marley, I'm gonna let you take the lead on this, talk about COGS, talk about all those pieces and break that down if you don't mind.
Yeah. So this is basically just a deeper dive of the numbers that we saw above. The sales row is basically your gross sales. In most businesses, there's costs of goods and services. Doesn't look like there is here. So that probably makes sense. There's not going to be like a sales affiliates or anything like that to have to pay out. And then you have your gross profit. once that is removed. And then we kind of go into our expense category. And everything here looks in line with what I would expect for a business like this. What you would want to be looking for is what is missing. So normally what I see as a missing item in small businesses is, can you scroll back up?
Yep.
They actually have advertising, but advertising and marketing are ones that I often don't see in P&Ls. And it's often because they truly aren't doing any marketing or advertising. But that's something that you need to make note of for yourself. If you're going to take over the business, what your strategy is to continue to like stabilize and grow the business, you will need to plan to have some level of expenses in that category. Yeah, so I mean, this is all basically what we already talked about. So everything that went into the expenses category, it all gets added up, and then that is deducted from the gross sales, and you're left with your net profit. And then again, at the bottom, we see what the adjustments are, at least what they feel they are at this time.
And I want to kind of go through a couple pieces here that for anyone who's watching. So like we've got wages here, right? So we know we're paying around $220,000 or $223,000 to the staff, right? The full-time and the part-time employees, right? So you can kind of extrapolate what each person's making from that, right? You've got 9 part-time and 1 full-time, so you can kind of backwards calculate that if you need to. When we have something like credit card fees, our brains immediately go like, why the heck are they getting charged fees on their credit card transactions? Are they holding a balance? That's where my brain went immediately. But it's really likely what's happening is, okay, I have a credit card processor. I'm processing a credit card. So these are the fees that my clients, as they come to pay their monthly or their weekly bill, I have to pay the credit card processor these fees. That's what that is. I just wanted to clarify to make sure we understood that was that. This is kind of a janitorial maintenance and repair services. That's kind of a open bucket, right? Because there could have been drywall repair. There could have been a lot of things going on in this section here. We don't really know what that's talking about, right? So if I were you, Vernice, I'd find out what just the standard janitorial maintenance would be, separate from whatever repairs there were, because that's going to give you a better understanding of the monthly costs instead of just kind of putting that into a bucket. Not that it's that crazy of a number. It's just good to understand. We don't know how many kids' lunches they provide, if it's daily, if it's monthly, if it's, pro bono, if it's kids who can't afford it. We don't know any of that stuff, right? So landscaping is pretty standard, looks like. Fees for licensing, pest control standard, property tax are going to be standard. That might not be in your calculations if you're renting, right? So keep that in mind. That could go away. But you're probably going to have to cover some type of, coverage for maintenance or something. I'm sure they're going to increase their costs in some way to cover that.
It could also, sorry, just to pause you really quick. It could also go up if you do end up purchasing the property and, it has gone up in value.
Yep. And that's another thing, Brittany said. There's a couple different things. If that's in someone's name versus in the business name, you would want them to transfer. You would want to take over the business instead of taking over changing the business LLC, unless there's liabilities, right? Because a lot of states have a transfer tax on real estate transfer. So if it's owned by the business already and you're buying the LLC, just step into the role of buying the LLC. Don't try to change the location of that property to another entity, because that's going to trigger the state and the town to get their money. So just another thing to think about, which goes off what Marley was saying. Yep, workman's comp insurance because they have staff there, and then yeah, all standard things. And then these are those same adjustments we just talked about. So essentially, this business can bring in $130,000 to Vernice, right? Now you're going to probably subtract some things once you start renting or whatever you might do, and maybe you're going to upgrade, maybe you're going to add more clients. Who knows what the capabilities of your staff and people are? We don't know any of that data, right? If I was looking at this business, I'd look at what the rules are based on square footage, what the rules are based on ages. I would want to know how many students I can fit into this building while also providing a good service, right? I've brought my child to a daycare center at the high school I used to work at, and there's 3 in that building. I brought her to the main one who was like, we have a a relationship, had a relationship with when I worked there. I think they still do, but the relationship was that our students who were doing the healthcare and all these other programs, human services, they would go in there and they would hang out with the kids and take care of them because they were going to be teachers. And when I went in there with my daughter, it was the first time my daughter like interacted with a large group of kids. It was mid-COVID. And it was also the first time she got sick. And it was within like, we were there for 10 minutes and kids were screaming and yelling and like there was no structure to it because there was one little room. They had 5 adults, but the square footage per room didn't make sense to my brain for like kids to space to, all that fun stuff. So as you're looking at that, I'm sure you know these numbers and these metrics better than I will or ever will. But keep that in mind, right? You can pack as many as you want in there and get as many going in. You can bring another teacher in, but if the square footage doesn't make sense, then you gotta do that balance. But you might be able to add 10 more people, 10 more students to that or childcare students. And that might increase your revenue by 30K, right? Or whatever it's going to be. So some really good value add potential, I'm sure. But it all depends on those numbers.
Yeah, and just like one last thing, this says 131.5, but this does not consider any holding costs. You will have debt of some kind in this purchase. So just make sure once you have all the terms outlined for yourself, that it still makes sense for you after paying holding costs, paying off that debt. Does it still make sense for you on a cash flow basis?
It's a great factor. So, Marley, if we were to look at a standard SBA, let's say she brought, because obviously if you're going to buy the property, let's say you went for a standard loan, and you went to SBA for the other part. So you need 10, let's say 5% for the SBA. Let's say it's 20K to purchase the business.
Yep.
Also buy the property, and let's say it's fully solar finance and you've put down 20% because you lucked out and you figured it out, right? So now you've got a loan for 64, right? For the property itself, plus you have a loan for the business around 230-ish, 35, something like that.
Yep.
So now we've got a loan that we have to pay off that's around 830, let's say, or let's say 800 to make the math easy. What is that gonna, can we run the quick numbers on that to see what that's gonna cost on a yearly basis, just to give Bernice a little bit of better understanding? I know rates are different and there's a lot of factors, but
yeah, so for SBA, it's anywhere from like 11 to 16%, right? I don't think that would be the rate on the real estate. I'm not 100% certain. So there's at least that. But if you're able to get that seller finance, that's a more ideal scenario anyway. Let me see.
And Bernice, what is your plan for acquisition to buy this? Are you planning to go for SBA? Are you planning to bring cash and try to, what will be the goal for you?
Okay, well, I've been hearing a lot, like not a good idea to go to get the SBA loan. So I don't know, I can always, try and find out how much they charge and everything. But I believe there's a lot of investors that want to partnership or invest. So
Beautiful.
yeah, I can reach out to them too.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
It's
that's
always
the
to
route.
learn, good to learn.
Yeah, that's definitely the route that I always suggest. Try to get it as creative as possible, especially given the scenario, like the person is likely trying to retire. It's not beneficial to them to get a bunch of money up front, as we all know, for capital gains taxes. If you're able to structure it primarily seller finance with enough cash up front to satisfy their immediate needs, and you can get a PML at a decent rate, like that's the route I would go.
But theoretically, if we were to go for SBA, let's say it's at 9% for everything, just averages out, or 8%. I just want to really quickly run that number on,
For
But-
how much?
for let's say 800 at 8%. 30-year amortization, just for funsies.
At a 30-year, we're looking at just shy of 6,500 a month.
So that's a little more, it's a little, yeah, it's a little bit more than the rent that they threw in there at 54,000. But they're gonna still, they're still gonna have you pay for a lot of other stuff too. It's, they'll probably do a net rental of some kind where you have to pay for certain expenses, or they might do a triple net lease for the property, right there. And we can talk about that another day, but that's basically commercial leases on properties. They basically have you, sometimes they have you pay for all the taxes and the maintenance and the insurance, or sometimes they just have you pay for certain pieces of that, depending on how many ends are in the calculation, net, triple net, or double net. But yeah, so 6,500. So, if you're
basically cut your cash flow in half.
right, so that just by purchasing this now, your SDE is down to somewhere in the 65 or 70K ish, right?
Yeah.
So now this business is not going to bring in that amount that they are talking about, right? This is for them, it's an SDE of 131, but for you, it's not going to be that. So just as you look at these folks, like this number here, like Marley, how would you, if you were going to look at this from a high level, kind of like if you look at a real estate property, that the expenses and everything else is somewhere around a certain number. Like what would you put on if you were going to have someone to do a super back of the napkin sketch calculation of this? Would you say 50, like just cut your SDE in half for a business like this going into it, or if there's no rent included, just to kind of give everyone an understand, like,
I mean, that's fair. It's not a one size fits all. I wish it was like real estate, but yeah, I'd probably expect that. So if you're shooting for getting at least 100 grand, 100 grand a year, then maybe plan for double that. And that probably goes for just about anything, because that 50% can cover any holding costs at a high level, as well as like growth expenses. I like to, dog ear about 20-30% for growth when looking at these deals.
makes sense. So what you're saying is, if I was looking to make $100,000 a year, I need to be looking at a $200,000 a year business.
Cash flow,
Cash
not
flow.
business. Yes.
Well, $200,000 cash flow business a year, SDE a year, just
Correct.
to cover before I even start running down the calculation rabbit hole, right?
Yeah,
Just so
fair.
I know it's worth it, right? Because, and also, Vernice, if you're going to bring in PMPs or private equity to be a partner on this, they're going to want half of it they're going to want to get paid back, right? So there's all those pieces. Right now, you may have just cut your business into a third, and you're going to still do the same amount of work for a $30,000 business as you would for a $100,000 business. So, I hope this was helpful, everybody. We've got Marley and I have another call like in 2 minutes, so I want to make sure that we're aware of that time. Does anyone have any questions that we might be able to answer before jumping off of here, so that we can clarify anything? Like I said, every week moving forward, like your homework this week is to find a business that you would want to purchase so that we can evaluate it, but make sure it's in the industry you want to be in. And we're going to send out, Jalen, would you be cool coming up with those questions that Marley did? We'll get them out and we'll send it in the email along with the recording and any resources we might be able to share.
Be on it.
Awesome. Thank you. So we're going to do that. And we will, yeah, does anyone have any more last minute questions before we jump off? Okay. Thank you, everybody. We really appreciate it. We'll be here next week, looking at some more deals, giving people some feedback. If you have deals that you find that you want to look at, bring it to us. We'll take a look at it with you. We just ask that you get it to us in advance or you redact some of that information. Okay. So if you can just take it into Canva or something and just blur out those, I just put boxes over the things that we didn't want people to see. because you are responsible for that NDA. So I want to make sure you have that. You can send it to us in advance. Our email is info@creativerootsholdings.com. And I will put that in it. When you get that email, you'll get an email from this recording. I'll make sure you're all on that email list. But hope to see you guys soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sam.
Bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
Marley.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.